It was a surprise to see the longest duration being just underneath 1 week.
But from what Christian has said, the duration is sometimes so long that the battery won't help you to go through that.
Yeah, I think it depends on your personal level of heat acceptance.
Hello and welcome to Uniper's Market Insights. My name is Florian Oberländer and I'm joined by two people today. As usual, our expert Gregor Pett. Hi Gregor.
Hi Florian.
And Christian Brose from our meteorologist team from Uniper. Thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for the invite, Florian.
Oh, you're welcome. And it's good to have you because we want to talk about the Uniper study about the so-called Dunkelflaute, the dark doldrum. But before we come to this, Gregor, we did a special episode about the Middle East 2 weeks ago.
Yes.
And we just wanted to touch base on that and give the people a little update. What is the current status?
There is an agreement to negotiate a peace agreement right now, and there's a certain timeline set for that. Has relaxed the markets quite a bit, so prices have come down, not quite to the levels before the war started. What we can see already is problems around these negotiations, and the ceasefires are frequently breached then from both sides, and they accuse each other, and there are multiple parties involved, including Israel and Lebanon. So what we can see already now that it's not a straightforward process, but a process that is also at risk. We still hope that it will calm down, but it's not a given.
We can still see risk priced into prices.
Yeah.
They have come down, but it's not a given at this point. Something that I wanted to ask you about is Iran is proposing within that negotiation process some fees for passing through the Straits of Hormuz. What is behind that?
They've been very clear that they want that. It's also a source of revenue for them, which they of course need the money. But it's another source of conflict. Of course, it could increase prices. Yeah? So the other countries don't necessarily like that. But it's also, when they would be changed or removed, etc., it's a constant source of discussion and conflict. Yeah? So that is another destabilizing element. And we can only hope that a stable solution will be found and that these frictions are overcome.
Yeah, absolutely. Something we will monitor closely, definitely.
Absolutely, yeah.
Moving on from this, and we will pick that up after the summer break again, hopefully with good solutions there. Christian Brose is our guest today about the topic Dunkelflauten, dark doldrum. Maybe before we start to dive into the topic, can you introduce yourself to our people?
Sure, Florian. So I joined the company in 2008 after being with a private weather service in Germany for 4 years, where I did some forecasts for the media, some agricultural forecasting. By the time I was joining, we had some colleagues in Sweden already, but we had none for the continent, so I was the first one there. I built up metrology services for the trading and asset optimization there. Meanwhile, I've become a team lead. We got one hydrologist and other meteorologists in the team. Jess was your guest a couple of weeks ago. We're providing anything which is related to weather and climate to all our internal customers here at Uniper.
Absolutely interesting topics. And to your, if you missed it, go back, I think, two months ago around that, a special episode with Jess Torpy, who also talked about El Nino and all of that good stuff. So really, really insightful.
It was a good one.
You are here for the Uniper study about the Dunkelflaute. We kind of wanted to take a closer look at this topic because last year, the renewable generation was around 46% in Germany. And of course, fluctuation within the grid system is then more given than without renewables. Before we dive into the numbers, what is the dark doldrum, the Dunkelflaute, precisely for the people who haven't heard that before?
Sure. It's a period where the generation of wind is lower than a certain threshold of the installed capacity, and it coincides with a low generation from solar PV below that threshold. You can argue that threshold, we took 10% of the installed capacity, as the study by the German Weather Service did. Others took 15, you go down to 5. You can argue that, but I think it's fair, if you play it openly, to go for it. So you're looking at single hour generation from both sources. You're checking, is it less than this threshold or not? If so, Dunkelflaute criteria are met. In our study, we looked at the moving average over 6 hours to define market relevant dark doldrum events.
Okay,
Makes sense. Yeah.
I mean, the study was just converted for Germany at this point. Gregor, is this a general problem for other countries as well?
Yeah, it is indeed. Yeah, it's a problem for all countries in which renewable production has a large share. We see that the particular problem with Dunkelflaute is that, of course, solar PV and wind are low at the same time, and every system that has this feature where any of those effects or both effects have an influence will have that problem. And including local phenomena when you've got certain parts of a country or of a system where these imbalances occur. So it's definitely an issue across the entire world, but also close to home in Europe, Germany, and the neighboring countries.
Okay, understood. So what were the findings of the study?
Main findings were it occurs more frequently than I personally thought it would. It's occurring a few times every month in winter at least. The mean duration, depending on the approach you take, if you're looking at single hours or moving average, is between 14 and 17 hours. That was quite long already. It seems to be shifting to the longer side with climate change, and also something which I thought was quite interesting. It makes sense from a meteorological perspective, but I guess we can touch upon it later if you want to. It was a surprise to see the longest duration being just underneath 1 week. We had 161 hours. That's pretty long.
Yeah.
Well, in fact, it's something which occurs regularly and frequently. It's not always necessarily a problem for the energy market, but you should plan with it. You should be aware of it, and you shouldn't neglect it and say, no, this is nothing we need to take care about. But as you said, Gregor, it's in an energy system which becomes intermittent due to intermittent generation. You can't steer PV and wind. You should think about it beforehand.
Yeah, absolutely. And I looked at the numbers as well, and as I said, 161 was the longest hours, that is, just to give the people out there an impression of what we are talking about. Last 10 years, a total of 1,435 dark doldrums lasting more than 10 hours occurred. That's on average every third day. Of course, you cannot say that it happens every third day. 144 on average per year over the last 10 years.
Exactly. And that's quite a number.
Yeah, absolutely. So what actually happens with the energy system? What is something that we have to consider when we talk about security of supply?
When solar radiation is low, we have low PV production. When wind is low, we have low wind production. What you need in that situation is, of course, something to balance that. So you need a generation that can be steered, flexible generation, that can be batteries, of course. But from what Christian has said, we see that the duration is sometimes so long that a battery won't help you to go through that. And even that, we don't have enough batteries to cover all of that. And it would also not be economic then to build batteries and to have them available for all these situations. Yeah, so that doesn't work. So we need then generation that is able to cover that. So hydro is an excellent source for that, hydropower. But we don't have enough hydropower in Germany and also in Europe, with the exception of Austria, Switzerland. Of course, they are blessed with a lot of hydro, and of course Sweden. But in Germany, we don't have enough to balance. So we need fossil generation. We have decided to phase out coal. So the remaining coal plants have limited capabilities to cover all of that. We already phased out nuclear. So what remains is gas-fired generation. And this is what also the government has taken into account in the law that is hopefully coming into effect and being implemented very quickly, where we look at increasing gas-fired generation for, in particular, these situations. We definitely need that.
When we talk about dark doldrums, can we say that this is more the norm than it is an exception?
I would say it's part of it. One thing, and I think that it's a good point you raise here, Florian, with climate change, what we have been observing throughout the past 15 years, I would say, is that weather becomes more stationary. So in the old days, you would have periods of high pressure, taking turns with low pressures passing, you would get in wind again. And the duration of such a blocked period is increasing. And with that, you should, in the future, take a closer look at that. I mean, a blocking high can, of course, be in a position you're not underneath it, but you're at the edge, then you do have wind. So it not necessarily means you don't have any wind, but the risk is increasing. And it's a standard pattern which occurs, for example, in summer almost every night because of low wind. Nice weather over the day, you got sun, but during night you don't.
Yeah. We will come to that in a second. You are mentioning the so-called Hitzeflaute, which is a new term as well. But thank you for giving some insight on the study itself. I will link the study that can be found on the website as well on here. And we come to a question from one of our trainees, Lisa, who has also a question about dark doldrums. And Lisa wants to know the following.
Hi, my name is Lisa Weising, and I'm a trainee at the Sustainability Strategy Department. And my question is, how precise can a dark doldrum be forecasted?
See, every morning we are starting with analyzing global weather models, all of them that are available for the next 2 weeks at least. Usually you can identify patterns where blocking high is included in a position that it will affect German markets or European markets roughly 7 to 10 days beforehand. It depends a little bit on the season or on the flow pattern, but I think that's a first guess. And by 5 days ahead, you should be able to forecast it relatively precisely and say, okay, we're running into problems or not, and please take action.
And then you probably have very thankful traders that can use the information.
Well, that's part of the job. It's a good collaboration. They take the action, but we need to identify when it's time to do so.
Okay, good deal. We bridged the topic to another one, and that question comes from the dual student, and Michael wants to know the following.
Hi, my name's Michael and I'm a dual student, and my question is, what impact do extreme weather conditions have on the energy markets in summer?
Well, first of all, in summer, the power demand has increased over the past years because of growing installation of private and also business air conditioning. That's a fact. We're getting into heat waves more frequently, so people try to cope with that. So on the one hand side, we are raising the demand. And then on the other hand, I'm taking up your example of hydropower generation, Gregor, which was an excellent one. Just think about a dry winter or a winter with less snow than usual, and then you're running into low river levels during summer. And less water in the rivers means it's heating up more easily. And then take the example of the nuclear power plants in France, just as last week, for example, last week of June, when we had outages there because the water in the rivers was too warm to effectively cool down the plants. And they were also running into environmental issues and limitations there. So that can add up. And then you're losing generation capacity while your demand is increasing. That's one example. The heat itself is stressful for the hardware, so to say. So if it's a power cable, if it's the power plant itself, where it's too hot, you do have, of course, also a flooding risk. It's something people tend to forget, but hot air can take much more moisture. So your severe weather events ending any heat period are becoming more severe as well. And then you can run into problems with that. Well, it's impactful.
And I think it's fair to mention as well that especially during the summer period, a lot of power plants are under maintenance and are not available. So
that's the usual maintenance period, and the maintenance schedules will have to adapt to those situations and to summer peaks, which are frequent in other countries that have a huge share of air conditioning. So we see that already. So parts of the US, for example, that needs to be taken into account. And also we need to be aware that there are plants that, like nuclear plants in France, that suffer from hot water. When water becomes too warm, they can't use it for cooling, and that can cause a problem as well of nuclear availability in summer.
And Christian, so what's behind the so-called Hitzeflaute? What does that mean?
It's a situation where you have your blocking high in summer, so you're losing wind. That's the Flaute part, the doldrum. Heat comes up very effectively underneath a high-pressure system in summer, especially when you got some help of maybe a Spanish low-pressure system, which is then pushing all the hot air from the Sahara into Central Europe. And then it's, of course, interrupted in terms of generation by solar during day. That's the good part about it, but the heat stays and the demand is increasing.
The so-called Hitzeflaute. Yeah. All right. Well, I think we covered all of the theme questions, but of course we cannot let you go without having a little bit of outlook on the upcoming summer vacation. For the ones that haven't booked a location yet, what would be your recommendation? What are the destinations you can still go to, or what is too warm or too rainy?
Yeah, I think it depends on your personal level of heat acceptance. And if you're fine with heat, but you want good weather, you go to Spain, you go to Ibiza, Mallorca, Sardinia, whatever. That area seems to be quite okay. Southwestern Mediterranean area. For me personally, that would be much too hot. I would prefer Sweden, but you have to accept some rain at times.
We will see what
I kept some days open, so I will be able to adapt to whatever weather occurs. Yeah.
Well, we're going to take a summer break anyways now, so we will back with another show in the fall time. Thank you very much for covering the topics today. Very insightful. And
thanks for the invite.
Yeah, anytime. And Gregor, thanks for your answers as usual as well.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
To you out there, thank you very much for watching or listening. Hope you tune in next time again. Until then, bye-bye.